Welcome to the Introduction to Bookshare. I'm Scott Doherty, one of the training and consultation coordinators for assistive technology with the Allegheny Intermediate Unit in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Today we're going to be taking a look at Bookshare, which is a repository for digital accessible reading material. This particular library has leisure reading materials available for students. For some qualifying students, textbooks and instructional materials are also available through Bookshare. And you'll see that a variety of formats are also available to accommodate users with differing print disabilities. Some of the benefits of using Bookshare are the accessibility of the materials within them. They were designed specifically to support the needs of individuals with disabilities that impact their ability to read. This could be disabilities that impact the ability to decode text, visually perceive text, or physically hold and manipulate a printed book. Bookshare is free or low cost. A number of years ago, the Office of Special Education Programs instituted funding to make Bookshare available to qualifying K-12 students across the United States, and that has continued over recent years. And then once students age out of the system, the subscription to Bookshare is low cost for an annual access. The nice thing about Bookshare is it does provide options for simultaneous text and speech on the screen for people who are sighted, but it also gives audio access for individuals who perhaps have a visual impairment, and for individuals who utilize Braille reading materials. Books are also available in that format for electronic Braille or refreshable Braille. And Bookshare also integrates with a number of devices and smartphone and tablet apps. So it really does give a level of portability and convenience to users to access their reading materials on the platforms and manners in which they wish to use them. So we're going to take a look at the Read Now feature in Bookshare. Before we delve into specifics about it, it's probably good to see what the program does and how it works. As I mentioned earlier, you do need to have a qualifying print disability in order to access Bookshare materials. Fortunately, they do make a number of titles available in demo or freely available mode, so that those of us who do not qualify for Bookshare accounts can still get a sense about what the tool does and play around with some of the tools, so that when we support student learners, we certainly can have some experience in using the web page and the tools. So we're going to begin first by just taking a look at the web page and typing demo here in the search bar across the top of the window. And we'll just click the icon to do a search. This is going to bring a number of results. I'm going to look for this Bookshare demo on economic analysis because it's got that Read Now feature, which is going to open this book in a browser. And it may take a couple seconds to a minute or so to load, depending on the size of the book. And then the toolbar is across the top, and in a moment you'll have a chance to explore these yourself. But right now I looked at the table of contents. We can go forward or next in the page.
Some markets involve a physical marketplace.
And then the speech also highlights as it's reading. The gear icon there lets us play around with different types of text appearances, margins. We can change the rate of speech, whether a single page, scrolling pages, side-by-side pages appear. We have options for 2 Microsoft voices here. The other way we can go in to do an advanced search, and in the field here we're going to look for books to search, and in the drop-down choose freely available books. These are ones that the copyright has expired in most cases, or they're otherwise in the public domain. And then we just click the advanced search button. We don't actually need to put a topic or any details in. So we'll pick a Herman Melville collection here. Again, clicking on Read Now, and we'll see the same interface come up in our browser. So again, you'll have an opportunity now to explore some of these features on your own. Here we're looking at the table of contents, which is something we can click on to navigate through the book.
6.
Listen.
Chapter I. Foot in stirrup.
So now it's time to explore. Go ahead and pause the recording here for a few minutes. You're going to need to visit the Bookshare site. Now, because of the way speech works on some devices, this will probably be simplest if you're able to do it from a computer, either a desktop computer or a laptop computer. Chromebook would be fine. So you'll visit the bookshare.org website, and then you've got both options to play around with. One is to type demo in the search bar at the top of the page in the blue area. The second option is to click on Advanced Search, which appears just below the search text field up in the blue toolbar. And that'll take you to a page where you can scroll down to find the section for books to search. Click on the drop box and select freely available books. And then you can simply click the blue Advanced Search button that's down on the bottom left of the screen. Again, you don't have to type in any more details or select subject areas if you choose not to. So once you've done the search through either one of those options, look for the blue Read Now icon that appears in the last column of the search results table. And once you click that, in a matter of a couple seconds in most cases, you'll see the document displayed with whatever settings were applied most recently, and you can begin playing around with some of the tools and settings within the reader. Once you've done that, I'd like you to visit the Google form that we shared at the outset of the training and complete the first section of that document. Once you've done that, please come back, hit play, and continue on with the next part of our presentation. So now we're going to discuss some of the qualifying print disabilities. So Bookshare and some other services like that exist because Congress recognized the need to provide access to reading material for individuals with disabilities. So this is actually, services like this have been around for decades. Bookshare is just one of the more recent tools available in our arsenal. So when we talk about qualifying print disabilities, what we're talking about, again, are visual disabilities that affect the ability to read and perceive text. In some cases, learning disabilities that impact the ability to read text, or physical disability that might prevent somebody from holding a book, turning pages, carrying anything with significant weight. So any of those could be qualified by a competent authority for Bookshare access. In terms of students for K-12, I have already mentioned that an OSEP grant makes the Bookshare program free for those users. One important thing to know about, though, in IDEA 2004, a special repository called NIMAC, the National Instructional Materials Access Center, was created, and it's a clearinghouse for publishers to submit specially formatted files that can be easily converted into accessible formats. In order to access materials created from those special file sets, the law does require students to have an IEP. So if you're looking to get a Bookshare account for a student in order to access textbooks and other accessible educational materials, they will need to have an IEP in order to have access to those materials. Without it, they can still, with a 504, access leisure reading materials, and that's certainly a worthy reason to have a Bookshare account. But if textbook and accessible educational material access is needed, a student has to have an IEP according to the law. Bookshare provides access a couple of different ways. So students could get access through an organizational sponsorship, where someone from the school, perhaps a special ed director, a teacher, a school psychologist, a medical doctor, would verify that the child meets the qualifications. And then within that organization, usually this is a school district level that does that, there would be people on staff who have the ability to add members, students who qualify for Bookshare. They would download content for materials, and in the case of textbooks and other accessible educational materials, or AIM, those are the only people who can actually download those and make them available to students. And then they can grant access to file use for the individual members in their organization. The adults who are organization sponsors, however, do not qualify and cannot use the materials for Bookshare unless they have a certified qualifying disability themselves. But just by nature of being the teacher who supports a student using Bookshare does not legally give us the ability to utilize those materials for personal use or to share them with other students who we might wish to use them with. Individual accounts under Bookshare can be generated by the school or families. Again, there will be a requirement to verify the qualifications for Bookshare access. As I mentioned, once someone exits a K-12 system, there is an annual subscription fee for Bookshare access for adults. At the time of this recording, it was $50. And they would be able to access any of those files that their account gives them access to. So in cases of somebody signed up under an organization sponsorship, a teacher would be able to download textbooks, and somebody with the individual membership would be able to access those materials that were downloaded for them. But an individual account also gives someone the ability to look up and download on their own leisure reading materials. And it's actually possible to have a student access both ways. I find it's helpful to have a student both be part of the member organization and also to have an individual account that they can essentially use like a library card for the things they want to read, the commercial and trade publications and books that are available. So this slide takes a look at what I was just talking about, the benefits and drawbacks of some of the types of memberships. So again, individual or organizational are the two types we generally talk about. The big drawback with an individual membership is if a student needs access to those educational materials and textbooks, an individual membership does not permit them to download those on their own. So in order to have NIMAC sourced materials, an organizational membership is required. In those cases, a teacher or sponsor would download the materials and get them into queue for a student. The beauty is that Bookshare allows an individual to have both types of membership, and that's what we refer to as a linked account. That's really the best of both worlds. So if you've got a student with an IEP who needs access to the NIMAC, sponsors would download those materials, make them available to the student, but the student could also access some materials independently and really make the most of their account. It's important when we talk about membership access and the different types of benefits and drawbacks that we also talk about misuse of the accounts. I already mentioned that if an individual does not have a qualifying print disability, it's illegal to utilize the materials secured through Bookshare. The other things that are important for school staff to know about are that it's not permissible to provide credentials to a non-qualified individual. So Johnny's got a Bookshare account, and it would be really nice if Johnny's brother could listen to some of the stories that he'd like to hear too. Well, if Johnny's brother doesn't have a qualifying print disability, it's not permissible to share the credentials and let him use the account. Even if a member is qualified, let's say we've got two people who both qualify, they have qualifying print disabilities, they have Bookshare memberships, it is not permissible to use another person's account to download materials for yourself. It is necessary under the Bookshare guidelines to download the book for yourself only and utilize the materials for yourself only. I mentioned before that although teachers are required to download certain materials for students, they can't actually use those reading materials by themselves as a sponsor and or non-qualifying individual. And even if you've got a classroom full of kids who all have Bookshare accounts, we cannot download a single file and share that one with the 20 other qualifying Bookshare members. Each time a download is conducted, it stamps personal information into the initial pages of the file. So it really is critical to make sure you're downloading materials individually for the students. All right, so now it's time to pause again briefly and spend some time looking at the membership account options. That was shown to you on slide 8, but there's actually a separate electronic handout that you can download to get a better look at it at a size that's convenient for you. So go ahead, take a look at those membership account options, and the Google form that was provided has some questions related to that particular table. Bookshare makes materials available in a number of formats, so depending on the accessibility concerns the individual has and the needs they have as a result of their disability, certain formats would make more sense for some users over others. One of the common formats that you'll see in Bookshare download options is the DAISY format. DAISY stands for Digital Accessible Information System, and increasingly those DAISY files have images available. 10 years ago that was not the case. I don't think 10 years ago we even had images at all, and it was a slow build, but increasingly we're seeing more offerings now where images are embedded with the file. So you may find some DAISY formatted files with images, or you may find some that say it's DAISY text only. DAISY formats are useful when you're looking to have the text on screen paired with synthesized speech. So we'll highlight as it goes along, and we'll actually have something to look at and listen to. DAISY formats will run on a variety of software titles. We've got a couple shown here for you. Bookshare Web Reader is the one we looked at earlier, but there are also third-party products that will run on a computer or tablet to access those DAISY files. Or if you're using tablets, iPads, for example, there are a number of apps that you can purchase, usually for a modest fee, that allow you to access Bookshare contents. Now, DAISY was both on-screen text and audio. The other option you have for downloads is a purely audio format, so no text would be displayed, and the options they give to you in Bookshare are to have an MP3, which would be played on any standard player, or a DAISY audio file, which is a specialized format made for dedicated reading devices, listening devices. They have some special navigation features, and you can change the speed on the DAISY audio files. With MP3s, it's just a shot-in-time recording. So whatever the voice is, it's usually Kendra voiced by Ivona, and whatever the speed is that the recording was made, it just is what it is. You can't change it. So the DAISY audio's got more capability because of the specialized hardware on which it works. As I mentioned, those MP3 files can be transferred onto smartphones and tablets or computers and played with any number of player programs. DAISY audio files, however, require specialized devices. For individuals who are blind or deafblind, Braille formats, Braille Ready formats, or BRF files are also an option for Bookshare materials. They come in grade 1 or 2 Braille, Unified English Braille, and English Braille American Edition. So there are different formats of Braille used actually around the world. In America, those ones listed there are the ones that are most common. So these Braille formats could be used with a refreshable Braille display like the one shown on screen there. So it's the purple device that is sitting under the QWERTY keyboard, and that has cells, that little pins that pop up to show the Braille on the document, and that can be scrolled through and regenerates from line to line with the refreshable Braille display. Or those files could be sent to a Braille embosser to create paper Braille. So either one of those options are available using the Braille formats. And then with some titles, you may see some other download options available, EPUB formats or Microsoft Word formats. So these, again, are often designed to run on commercial products like Kindles and Nooks. I'm not even sure if they're making Nooks anymore, but so those kinds of reading tools that are available commercially, sometimes we have Bookshare offerings in those file formats as well. So what we're going to take a look at, we already did some searching for demo and freely available materials in Bookshare. We're actually going to make use of the same menu bar at the top of the page, and we have the ability to search by book's title. We can type in an author's name, first and or last, and then the International Standard Book Number. The old version is ISBN 10. A number of years ago, that's been increased to ISBN 13. So if you've got either one of those numbers at your disposal, you can also search that way. When you do a search, you'll see your results coming up in a table as shown there on screen. So I did a search for the Universal Design for Learning book by David Gordon, Ann Meyer, and David Rose, or I could have plugged in the ISBN number for my print copy of the book to see if it was held in Bookshare. The second to last column there is labeled as features, and it has an icon next to the result. That's an indication that it is available as a DAISY image file. All right, so now is another time for you to spend some time with Bookshare. So this activity will require you to fire up your browser once again and visit the bookshare.org site. And the Google form that was provided to you has a number of titles that I'd like you to look for, either by author's name or title of the book or ISBN number. And then I'd like you to complete some missing information from what you find in the search results. Also at the bottom of that is a place for you to search a book of interest to your student, one that they might have on their required reading list now, or a book that might be of interest to them to read for independent and leisure reading. So there's also a place on the Google form for you to search for student-specific material and make note of what options you have and file formats are available within Bookshare. So go ahead and pause the presentation, spend some time doing those searches, answering those questions, and when you're ready to return, go ahead and hit the play button to move on to the next part of our presentation. Now, not all students are using organizational accounts, but it is important in school settings to understand a bit about how those are structured. So these next several slides are going to just walk through some screenshots to show you the interface on the web page that are used by the adults supporting student Bookshare users. So sponsors are often teachers, curriculum folks, sometimes paraeducators within a school district that are chosen by leadership in the school district or school to be able to add student members, download materials for students, and take on some of the administrative day-to-day functions of managing Bookshare materials. So as an organizational administrator, that person has the ability to identify sponsors, and that's what this page here looks like. So for this particular district, they added Scott Doherty, me, as one of the sponsors who has the ability to add student members, download materials, create reading lists for the organization. So once you're logged into the organization's account, you would click on the Bookshare logo, go into My Bookshare, which is that panel of links on the left-hand side of the screen. And then there's a sponsors link that you would click and choose the Add Sponsor icon. It'll ask for the information shown on screen there. Some of it is required, some of it is optional. But that is the process to adding the adults in who would have the primary responsibility for managing materials and students within Bookshare. So again, under the Add New Sponsor option, some of those required fields are name and title and email and phone. Drop-downs for the district and school will be populated based on what the organizer added when they created the account. As I mentioned, most schools and school districts might identify a special education teacher. Teachers of the visually impaired very often are managing Bookshare accounts because of the student population they serve. In some cases, the supervisor of special education takes that on, and in other districts, it might be the reading ELA curriculum people taking on those responsibilities. And there's not a limit to how many sponsors, so it's also not uncommon in larger organizations to have a number of people with these capabilities. Sponsors then have the ability to manage members, and these are the qualified students who have print disabilities as outlined in the law and the Bookshare regulations. And they have the ability to verify that the individual student does indeed qualify for Bookshare. So again, we're using the same path of those tools on the left-hand side. Rather than clicking on sponsors, we would now click on members, and this would display the current members. These are all fictitious, so no worry about confidentiality there. But this is showing us the names, ages, school locations of these students, the type of membership they have, whether it's organizational membership only or if they have an individual membership. And we also have information about their qualifying disability and the type of support plan they have. Again, if you're looking for textbooks and accessible educational materials sourced from the NIMAC, The law does require that a student has an IEP in order to make use of those specially sourced files. Just like with the sponsor edition dialog boxes, there are some required things in here. You'll notice that usernames and passwords are not necessarily required for Bookshare access. The yellow icons that you see on screen can be clicked on to provide some additional information about what that feature does. So that's a nice little support feature that lets you find out when sometimes you're not sure what you're clicking on. So those yellow question marks can help you figure that out and make a determination. The bottom part with reading preferences, while you have that option every time you select material on what type of file you want to utilize and some of the special considerations for each of the different file types, these are the default settings. So this is what you would typically want or expect that child user to access. But again, if on a case-by-case basis, you need to make a different selection, you do have that possibility when you're downloading. So sponsors, when they log in, on the left-hand side, they will see some sponsor tools available to them. One of the useful ones to take a look at is the ability to add a reading list. So very frequently, curriculum departments and schools will issue summer reading lists or lists of the books that will be read over the course of a school year for a particular area of the curriculum or a particular grade level. So sponsors can actually create reading lists. So if Buchanan Elementary has a 4th grade reading list that's different than Washington Elementary's 4th grade reading list, you can create as many of those lists and do those searches for books with this reading list feature. It's really a nice way to quickly download materials for a number of students needing to access the same books. Reading lists just require you to give a name. You can type in a description. So if it's for a particular teacher's class, sometimes the description will indicate this is for Mr. Miller's 7th grade science course. And then you can determine who has the ability to access and utilize those reading lists. If it's just this individual themselves, the owner of the account. Whether it's the member logging in or anyone within the organization. So once a search is done or a reading list is chosen, you would click download on the title that you want in your search results. And eventually you're going to be brought to a list of the members within the organization. So it's just a matter of checking a box on the left-hand side for the student or students who need to access those books. So when you click on that, you'll note on the right-hand side, many of those say Daisy with images. So those are the default options that would be set if you hit the checkbox. But in the case of Jimmy P here, we're going to go ahead and maybe make another selection different than his default. So that drop box allows me to do that. Once you make the selections and have checked all of the students who need individual downloads of the book, you would click the download books icon here at the bottom left of the table, and it would begin that process of downloading the individual titles. All right, that was a lot to cover about the organization memberships. That was all on slides 17 through 23. So go ahead and pause the presentation at this point. You can access the electronic versions of the PowerPoint to go back and refer to the material on these previous slides to answer the questions, or certainly rewind the recording using the scrubber at the bottom of your screen. Once you're ready, we're in the home stretch here. So the last thing we're going to take a look at is actually where we started with the demo. And as I mentioned, we now know that a variety of users can access Bookshare and access titles in a number of formats. Bookshare also gives us some support in providing lists of tools that can be used with those file formats. So the one we began with at the outset of this presentation was the Bookshare web reader. So it's browser-based. It runs right on the computer or tablet, depending on what you're running it on, like an iPad, for example. Sometimes the speech is controlled by settings of the device itself. So there might be some differences, but the web reader really is generally point and click, probably the simplest way to access books. And if you've got students who are using DAISY files, wanting the text and speech simultaneously, that's often the method that a lot of students prefer. But there are additional Windows and Macintosh programs from other companies that can be purchased or provided by vendors to access Bookshare accounts and some specialized features like navigation I mentioned before. Tablets also, if you're running Android or iOS, have different options for accessing Bookshare content from the tablet itself. And then particularly with individuals with visual impairments, there are a number of companies producing specialized reading devices to work with those audio files or to display Braille and allow for Braille note-taking. So there are dedicated reading devices and some specialized assistive technology that work particularly with those BRF and audio files that depending on the student's needs and access concerns might be the tools you need to access. One of those that we're going to end with here is an iPad app called the Voice Stream Reader. It's actually also available on Android, so links at the bottom of the slide presentation will let you get to those. This particular video does not have any audio, so I'll just narrate a little bit to walk you through what we're seeing. So this is the main page of the screen. It allows us to put in the credentials for a Bookshare account within the software itself, so you don't have to log in each time. Tapping on account there, you would just the first time plug in the user's name and password, and whether they prefer to use images, those DAISY images we talked about before. And then we've got a search bar and some books that are already in the library. So here we're going to go in and add something from Bookshare. It takes us to a search screen that we can look at our download history. So if a teacher's downloaded something for me or I've downloaded something myself, this lets me access those previous downloads and bring them back onto my device. And that's what we did here with this sample EPUB document. So it's now loaded onto my screen. It's got some navigation here where I can jump around to different page numbers in the app. I can get into a table of contents and it shows me my progress for how much of that particular section I've read. You'll also notice a little scrubber bar at the bottom, so we can slide that left and right to advance as well. The next and previous buttons can be configured to go to the next paragraph, sentence, word, whatever. So those are some of those controls we saw. We can change the speech and voice that's applied, change pronunciations that might not be coming out correctly. So really a lot of controls to personalize this and make the text and speech accessible to the user. So your final activity for today's presentation is to spend some time looking at some of the tools that are available to read Bookshare files. And these are going to vary depending on what your students are using in terms of computers or devices. If they're on Macintosh computers or on Chromebooks, there are different options available based on the platform. So that link that's shown there on screen is where you can visit the Bookshare website, and it will list out for you the various options with links to the tools. So I'd like you to spend time exploring that, thinking about the students you serve and the types of devices that are in use in your school, and go ahead and complete that 5th section of the Google form. Once you're done with that, please return. We'll wrap up with a couple other pieces of information. So there was a lot covered in today's presentation. Hopefully you've got a better appreciation for why Bookshare exists and the possibilities that it offers to students with qualifying print disabilities. If you do need additional help, however, perhaps you wanted to become a sponsor or learn about how to qualify a member, the first person you should touch base with is your school district's director of special education, or sometimes it's a pupil personnel director, but one of your leadership members in your district, because they're often the ones configuring and administering the organizational account. You can also, if you know who the sponsors are within your organization, as I mentioned, very frequently teachers of the visually impaired are handling Bookshare memberships because of the natures of their students' access needs. So those are people to certainly reach out to. And then each intermediate unit in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has assistive technology specialists. At IU3, there are 3 of us who are training and consultation coordinators in the area of assistive technology. So you can reach out to Kendra Bittner, myself, or Kristen Tashwire, depending on which district you're with. And certainly you can reach out to any one of us, and if we are not the support person for your district, we will put you in contact with the correct consultant. Thank you very much for your time today. Be sure to complete the Google form and get those submitted so we can get you proof of your attendance. And I thank you for your time. Good luck exploring the wonderful world of Bookshare.